All right, what is up, everybody? Carlton Flowers here with the Go Political channel, and we are back. And I tell you what, I have not done a live stream in so long that I forgot how to set everything up, but I'm trying to get back on track, and I'm going to be doing some live streams from time to time, just jumping on to talk about some various topics that are in the news. And this one I'm just burning to discuss because this is just getting crazier by the minute. So shout out to all the members.
Yay!
You know who you are. I'm so glad for your support and have you. Also, if you would like to become a member and help support the channel, please do. And I thank you in advance. It is very expensive to do this whole YouTube thing, and I spend a few $100 a month just for all of the licensing, the music, the graphics, the software, and all that good stuff. Hardware, not to even mention that. It gets crazy. Okay, so we're going to get on this whole crazy Jeffrey Epstein thing. This has just gotten out of control. It's out of hand. And right now, we're in a position in this country where we have no absolute leadership. Of course, Donald Trump is the president of the United States, and the Republicans have control of the Senate and the House. But there is an interesting phenomenon that I have noticed that I don't think I've ever experienced in my entire lifetime. And that is the fact that there is no absolute leadership. What I mean by that is this. When accusations are made, when people are accused of breaking the law or doing things, or there's big disagreements that have to go to the Supreme Court, nothing seems to be absolute because it is a constant battle between the two leading parties, the Democrats and the Republicans. And even though some things are decided at the Supreme Court level, most of these arguments that go back and forth, there's no cut and dry leader that can say this is the way it's going to be and settle it. That does not happen. It always has to end up in the Supreme Court. And so what we notice is that the Democrats dig up dirt on Republicans, and all of the people who are in the Democratic cult will believe these accusations and think that the Republicans are all going to jail. And to the contrary, the Republicans will dig up dirt on the Democrats and say all of these Democrats are going to jail. And what happens in the end? Absolutely nothing. So we've been watching this Epstein mess for how many years now? How long has it been? Now, we've had chances by the Obama administration, the Trump administration, the Biden administration, and now again the Trump administration to be transparent and to clear up all of this nonsense and to put it to bed. But we don't see that happening. Right now, we have the Democrats demanding the release of the Epstein Files, which is kind of crazy because we didn't see any of this during the 4 years that the Biden administration was in power. They passed up on their chance. Now, in the 2024 election, Donald Trump ran on a kind of weak promise because he didn't make it real definitive, but he said, hey, yeah, I'll definitely look into that. We'll release the Epstein Files. And then he chose Pam Bondi, who came in with guns blazing, saying that everything is going to be released. That's it. No more playing around. And whomever is named in this Epstein client list that we're finding out doesn't exist, well, it's too bad. And of course, they had the big release. They had all the social media stars with these big 3-ring notebooks full of papers that had nothing but blacked out redacted information, and none of it was new. And so she looked kind of stupid. We had all this buildup, all of this talk, and then when the release happened, it was a big letdown. So Pam Bondi was left out in the cold looking kind of stupid. Now, it doesn't stop there. We had Kash Patel and Dan Bongino, who came in hot, saying that they were going to uncover everything. They made big, bad, bold promises. And if you have been listening to the Dan Bongino podcast before he took his position as deputy FBI director, you know that he had some bold accusations, and he claimed that all of this information on this list, it was there, and that he was going to serve his country and jump in here and clean up the mess, only to get appointed and say that Jeffrey Epstein ended his own life. There's no there. It was the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen. Along with Kash Patel with his jaunting eyes back and forth saying, well, yeah, he ended his own life. nothing really happened. And then we have the infamous missing minute on the video camera. That's just another story there, but we'll get into that at a later date. But what I want to talk about now is the breaking news, because there's a twist. When we think it can't get any more ridiculous, it does. Dan Bongino stated that he was going to walk. He was going to quit if Pam Bondi was not fired by Donald Trump over all of this botched release. Since they ran their mouth, they shot out their mouths, they came out too hot talking all of this big stuff, and then they backed off. And how many times in the last 3 weeks have we heard that the files would be released? In fact, Donald Trump had commanded Pam Bondi, release everything. I don't care. Release it all according to what the courts say. that was the kicker there. And if the courts say that that information can't be released, well, it's not going to be released. And that's why we don't see anything happening. But it gets better. So fast forward to today, and here we have this breaking story. Blindsided and annoyed. Pam Bondi insiders tell of fury at Tulsi Gabbard. As you know, Tulsi Gabbard came out with the story that former President Barack Obama committed treason when he had the breaking news of the Russian collusion in the 2020 election, or the 2016 election, when Hillary Clinton lost. And he stated that the election was hacked. The machines that count the votes, they were hacked. And it was the Republicans working with Vladimir Putin in hacking the machines to throw the election. And so Tulsi Gabbard comes out with this great report that stated that Barack Obama was aware that his own team of people that he put on this, he was aware that they made the statement that the collusion probably didn't happen and the election was not hacked. And so as the story goes, Barack Obama allegedly went with the story anyway to smear Donald Trump and try to get him impeached. Now, that's where we get to today and this crazy story where Pam Bondi is PO'd. She's pissed off at Tulsi Gabbard, and let's find out why. So according to the story, Attorney General Pam Bondi found herself scrambling to contain the political fallout after Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard hijacked her handling of the Jeffrey Epstein crisis and launched an uncoordinated attack on Barack Obama. In other words, she didn't tell Pam Bondi anything about it. This is according to several sources close to the AG. Gabbard, reportedly desperate to repair her standing with Trump after being excoriated and excluded from recent meetings, suddenly demanded that Bondi investigate what she called a treasonous conspiracy by Obama officials regarding that 2016 Russia investigation. The move caught Bondi completely off guard, and as the sources told the New York Times. So fresh off a nasty fight with top FBI officials over the mess regarding her announcement that an Epstein client list didn't exist, the Attorney General was given little warning that Gabbard was about to dump the Obama investigation in her lap, sources said. So as we've been reading in the news lately, the FBI and the DOJ are up to their ears with all of the different investigations, these high-profile investigations that are going on, and they can't even keep up. So as Dan Bongino has stated, every single one of the cases are barn burners. You know, if it's a rating from 1 to 10, they all rank a 10, and they can't even keep up. And so Attorney General Pam Bondi is angry. So she claims that she had no idea that this was going to happen, and that Tulsi Gabbard was just trying to get back in good graces with the president. And it was funny. I had to laugh. Let's just read this little paragraph about what Donald Trump stated after she released her report on Barack Obama. She's like hotter than everybody. She's the hottest one in the room right now. That's what Trump declared at a White House event Tuesday, signaling that Gabbard was back in his good graces after her diversionary attack relieved pressure from the never-ending Epstein file crisis. Okay, so maybe this is true. I thought that was kind of inappropriate, the way that he presented that, but that's Donald Trump. That's his personality. So it goes on to say that the stunt put Bondi in a nearly untenable position. Her staff scrambled for a solution that would satisfy Trump without committing to a politically explosive Obama investigation with unacceptable, unpredictable legal and political consequences. And I believe that 100%. 100%. This is some really dangerous water that they're wading into, and it's going to be really hard to follow through and nail former President Barack Obama. Now, of course, when this came out, all of the people that are in MAGA, the Republicans, the diehard Republicans, honestly did believe that Barack Obama committed treason, and they think he's going to go to jail. I say otherwise. Now, was what he did wrong? Perhaps it was. I mean, he did shoot his mouth off. I'll shoot another video and show footage of the speech that Barack Obama made when he was talking about the so-called Russian collusion and the hacking. He was saying that the election was hacked. He did say that with his mouth. And he did know, as a matter of fact, that it wasn't, because the documents that were released that Tulsi Gabbard dug up did state that he was aware, but they carried on with the story anyway. All right. So, yeah, it was pretty bad, but this is regular politics. How many times do we wake up to see a news story where one party leader accuses the other of something as dastardly as treason? If it's not President Trump being accused of committing treason and, supposedly facing impeachment, then it's Donald Trump accusing the Democrats of committing fraud, committing treason, of not obeying the law, not upholding the law. And then both sides state nobody's above the law and we have to have a rule of law. I'm sure you've been following this whole nonsense with the illegal immigration topic, which I'm going to do another video on that because I have an interesting take, as my son's best friends are both immigrants and they have family members that are trying to get here, some that are here on temporary work permits, and they want to abide by the rules. And a lot of people are looking at the illegals as they are the villains, but there's one villain that's being left out. There's one sector that seems to be above the law that nobody is talking about. You'll be shocked to hear about that, but we're going to stick to this topic, so stay with me on that. It's coming. Now, let's go on and read a little bit more of this. Hours after Gabbard's provocative White House briefing, Bondi's deputies posted an ambiguous statement announcing a strike force. I guess they're going to come in and strike to examine the accusations, though the details about the group's operations at the timeline remained absent. A spokesman for Obama dismissed the attacks as a ridiculous and weak attempt at distraction. I can hear Barack Obama right now saying that this is all a bunch of nonsense. And lastly, current and former officials warned that building a coherent conspiracy case against Obama-era intelligence officials would be challenging, while prosecuting Obama himself would be practically impossible given Supreme Court immunity protections. I agree with that. Now, is this a distraction? I don't know. Do you think it is a distraction? Maybe you do. Maybe you don't. But one thing is for sure. This Epstein mess is never going to be unraveled. It never will. We've seen both parties come at this, and both have failed. It seems like they FAFO when they get into power and then are made aware of what's really in those files. Okay, it seems that that's always the case, no matter what party is in control. But here's the interesting thing that a lot of people are missing out on. The New York state courts are not going to release the information. They've even been subpoenaed by the U.S. House of Representatives. But guess what? They don't have to provide that information. And if they do, it's probably going to be redacted, and it may not be anything more than what we already know at this point. Now, here's another interesting thing about this whole mess. We got the Democrats jumping on. We've got Timu Obama Jeffries, Hakeem Jeffries, Timu Obama, Walmart Obama, who's shooting off at the mouth stating that they need to release this information right now because it is a shame that the president of the United States is hiding something. Oh, really? Well, where was your fervor when Joe Biden was the president? Now, I do think that this is politically motivated with the Democrats all jumping on the bandwagon to force the release of the files. But I think it's disingenuous. Why? Well, first of all, they know that nothing's going to get released, that it's not going to happen because the New York court system is not going to turn over the information unless we call out the National Guard and invade. They know that. Second of all, we know that there are high-profile Democrats that are not just appearing in these documents, but could be implicated in those documents. Now, some say that President Donald Trump is in the Jeffrey Epstein files, and that's why he's not going to release it. Now, that's a half-truth. I think both parties have it wrong. All of you cult members who are bedwetting Democrats and diehard Republicans, you're all wrong in that regard. You're all wrong. And I'll tell you why. Okay, so first of all, in 2024, during the campaign season, before the election, Donald Trump did state that he would look into releasing the Epstein files. He didn't come out and say, I will release the Epstein files if you vote me for president. He didn't say that. It was a weak statement. He said, yeah, I'm open to looking into that. We'll certainly consider it. But he said it with his own mouth. Now, why would he state that if he is named and implicated in those files? Why would he run on that? And why would he allow Pam Bondi to shoot off at the mouth? And why would he allow Kash Patel and Dan Bongino to say so boldly that it was a purely political situation, that those files have not been released? He wouldn't have let them do that. Now, is he named in those documents? Yeah, he probably is. But is it something damning? No, it probably isn't. Yeah, he used to hang out with Jeffrey Epstein. Yes, he's been on that airplane, and his name is probably listed on the flight logs. But is his name listed as a client for some of the dubious services that were going on at the island? Probably not. I would bet you 99.9% sure that there is nothing damning in those files about Donald Trump. Now, the reason why I state that is this. Let's think about it. Let's use logic and reason. What makes you think that President Joe Biden would have sat on that information for the 4 years while he was in power? What would make you think that during the campaign season that they would not have used that to stop Donald Trump from becoming president? Now, let's also think about the things that happened during the campaign season and the extents that the Democrat-ruled Department of Justice went to stop Donald Trump from getting into office. First of all, what did they say every day, a million times a day? They said that Donald Trump represents a threat to democracy because he's going to be a dictator. There will never be another election in the world, and people will be put into concentration camps. People will be run out of the country. All black and brown people will be disenfranchised. You know the drill. All of those rumors that went around are accusations, false accusations. What did they try to do to stop him? Now, they put him in court. They nailed him with, of course, the 34 felony accounts for the one act of mislabeling the hush money payment to Stormy Daniels, right? And they turned that into 34 felony counts, which that's another video for another day. At best, at worst, it was one count. if a felony. At best, it should have been a misdemeanor. But anyway, they were intent on putting Donald Trump in jail. In jail, okay? They weren't pulling any punches. Letitia James also tried to bankrupt Donald Trump and snatch away from his grips $4 billion, $4.5 billion, and take Trump Towers, all of his properties, away from him because of the alleged mortgage scandal. What is up? Cooking with Frank is in the house.
Yay!
Yes, sir. Shout out to Frank. Always dropping bombs with the excellent content. Glad to have you here, my brother. Okay, so they tried to bankrupt him. They tried to nail him with a $4.5 billion fine. They tried to get him arrested through the Stormy Daniels trial. Okay, and then, of course, we know that they tried something else that failed when he was making a speech in Butler, Pennsylvania. And then again at Mar-a-Lago on the golf course. So, do you think that the Democrats who tried to jail him, who tried to bankrupt him, and tried to give him a free ticket to the pearly gates, do you think that they would have just sat on those Epstein files if they knew that there was something damning in those files about him? The answer is no. The answer is no. Because what would be worse, doing this or releasing the Epstein files? I think this is a lot worse than releasing information in those files. I mean, if they put him in court and nailed him with those 34 felonies over Stormy Daniels, what makes you think that they would hold back if they had something in their hands in the Epstein files? So that's why I don't believe that there's anything in those files that is damning to Donald Trump. So why is he hesitant on releasing those files? Well, I'll give you my theory. I think it's because he's not the biggest dog in the kennel. There's somebody else out there in the world who is more powerful than Donald Trump, who is in his ear. We know that. We know that to be true. Now, you might say, no, Donald Trump, he's the biggest, baddest mofo on the planet, and he doesn't back down, and he ain't scared of nobody. But I'm telling you what, that's not true. Something happened last week that proves that I am right, that people do get in his ear, and he's not the biggest dog in the kennel. Y'all ever heard of a lady by the name of Candace Owens? You probably have. There was an excellent series that Candace Owens did, that series of about 8 live streams. I watched them all. I was there every day. Candace Owens was streaming about the president of France and his wife, Brigitte Macron. And she dug up information that was already out there, something that sparked this big lawsuit in the country of France about the fact that Brigitte Macron is not who she claims that she is. And Candace Owens said, hey, I've got the goods on this woman. She's not a woman. She's a man. Okay? So she did this series, and it was just blazing fire. If you haven't seen them, you need to go back and watch this. It's amazing. And so what she said was that they stopped at nothing to prevent the information coming out about Brigitte Macron's background, including somebody that was done that way, okay? And in fact, people that were jailed, lots of things that were done to prevent that information from coming out. And so something happened in February that she did not let the cat out of the bag until a couple weeks ago. And I was shocked when she told this story. Here's what she said. In February, she got a phone call from someone in Washington, D.C. and said, hey, we need you to stop with this whole expose about Brigitte Macron. Could you please do that? And she's like, no. Why? Who is this? Why? What's your reasoning? And the person came back and said, well, there's some big negotiations going on right now. And if you don't stop what you're doing, it could mean that they are not able to end the Russia-Ukraine war, because this individual is very connected to that. And in fact, that person is here visiting Washington, D.C. So she said, I'll do what I want. And she got off the phone. She was 9 months pregnant at the time. And so she got another phone call, and this time it was from the President of the United States. Yes, Donald Trump himself gets on the phone with Candace Owens and tells her, hey, listen, can you do me a favor? I got a real situation here. I don't really know all the background of what's going on, but the president of France is here, and we're trying to do this negotiation deal that could stop the war in Ukraine. And he asked me if I could reach out to you and get you to back off of this whole expose that you're doing, and that he would continue with this negotiation process about the war. And so Candace Owens was shocked. She's like, what the heck? So the president of the United States is telling me that if I don't stop this expose, the war could go on and people could lose their lives and, pretty big implications. And she thought, wow, all right. Well, I certainly don't want to be responsible for people losing their lives, so maybe I should back off for a while, even though she said that at some point I'm not. It doesn't mean that I'm going to shut up forever. So she shut her mouth momentarily, and the president of France, I guess the negotiations went on. And of course, as we all know, the war didn't stop. It did not stop. But it was interesting that the president of France claimed that he had the power to stop that war, but he would only stop it if Donald Trump got on the phone and asked Candace Owens to stop with the expose of his wife being a man. And Candace Owens did state that Donald Trump did not know the background of the story. He did not know the situation. All he knew is he was in a hot moment and he needed this man to negotiate so they could get a peace agreement with the Russia-Ukraine war. So she just talked about all of this and released that information last week on a live stream. Now, tell me that you think that there aren't other world leaders or people behind the scenes. It could be financial people, rich fat cats. Tell me that you don't think that there's somebody that can swing their weight around and influence or control or put Donald Trump in his place and say, no, you're not going to do this. If the president of France could get in his ear and tell Candace Owens to stop with this expose, or else he would not continue the negotiations to stop a war, that tells me that Donald Trump isn't completely in control. Now, let's also consider this. He said with his own mouth during the campaign that he would stop the Russia-Ukraine war. That's what he said. And then he went on to say that I'll stop the war before I'm even, before the inauguration. As soon as I win the election, I'll get on the phone with Putin and I'll stop this war immediately. I'll put an end to it right now, the minute that I'm elected president of the United States. That's what he said. So that didn't happen. And then inauguration happens. He said, I'll stop the war on day one. Well, that didn't happen either. The war's still going on. Not only that, here's something else for you to consider. Not only did he fail in stopping the war, he authorized the sale of missiles, Patriot missiles, to Europe to be funneled to Ukraine. Now, he was dead set against the funding, and that's also another video for another day, another discussion, talking about the Democrats, Joe Biden, President Biden, Sleepy Joe, funding the Ukraine army, putting $250 billion of taxpayers' money, actually it was printed money, and then we pay for it because we have to pay taxes, print money out of thin air, $250 billion for munitions for the Ukraine to fight that war, right? Trump was against that. And that was one reason why I voted for Trump, because I was against the funding of the Ukraine war. $250 billion for a war, but then we have homeless people here, and we have a government that says, oh, we don't have money for the problems in the black community, but we can print $250 billion and send that for munitions to the Ukraine while the defense contractors get rich and BlackRock's investments go straight up, and then inflation happens because there's more dollars floating around out there in circulation because they printed all that money. So I thought, well, I'm against that. I'm not voting for that because I know that if Kamala would have won, we would have continued funding the war in the amount of billions of dollars. All right, so let me backtrack a little bit. Let me get back on track. So Donald Trump shot his mouth off. Number one, said he could stop the war the minute he's elected. And if not that, he would end the war the first day after inauguration. Didn't happen. War continues on. And then he even authorizes the sale of Patriot missiles to the Europeans. I think NATO. I don't remember who paid for it, but basically it was kind of it was a sneaky thing going around Jake's barn to do the same thing. Instead of sending those missiles or selling them directly to the Ukrainians, we sold them to Europe. And then, well, Europeans, they can do whatever they want with it, which he knew that they were going to go to Ukraine, right? So we sell the missiles. At least we got money for it, but he knew where they were going to go to. It was going to keep the war going. Doesn't sound like what he campaigned on, does it? He said he was going to end the war. He couldn't do it. And then he ended up coming up with this scheme that he concocted to get munitions that will keep the war going. Who got in his ear about that? Who changed his mind? Did he FAFO and find out that he can't stop the war? And, you know, Democrats claim that Donald Trump is Putin's hoe. That's what Jasmine Crocker said, baby, Donald Trump, he Putin's hoe. That's what she said. So they were supposed to be in bed with each other, right? He was supposed to have this great influence. Well, he doesn't. And now he's aiding and abetting the country that is fighting against them. Kind of interesting, isn't it? So that proves to me that there are entities, people, groups, organizations, powers that are out there that are above Donald Trump. Now, let's take it all the way back to this Epstein mess. Let's take it all the way back. Then we'll bring it home. So his name might appear in these Epstein files. He did shoot his mouth off, stating that he was going to release everything, and now we're stymied. So the Democrats are shooting their mouths off, saying release everything. The Republicans are shooting their mouths off and putting their foot in their mouth, stating that they're going to release everything. And meanwhile, nothing's happening. Nothing at all. Nothing at all. And we're probably not going to see anything more than the same redacted crap that has already been put out. Why? It's because there's some big people that are out there that are in that file. Big people. Now, I'll tell you two people that I know that don't want that information to come out. One is former President Bill Clinton. Funny how the Democrats put out this meme on social media with Clinton smiling like, ha ha, talking about the fact that Trump doesn't want to release the files because he's named. Now, it's hilarious that they put Clinton's picture on there when we know beyond a shadow of a doubt that he probably will be implicated if that information is released. Now, maybe Bill Clinton doesn't have the power to force his hand and say to the New York courts, don't ever let this information get released. And maybe he does. Now, I found an article. I did a little digging. So while the people accused Trump of, being best friends with Putin, we forget the fact that Bill Clinton is connected to Russia. A lot of y'all forgot what he did way back when. Let me see if I can find, I got it on Grok here. Let's look at this information that I found. Talk about old Slick Willie. Way back when, Slick Willie, he did a keynote speech for this organization in Russia, and he made like $500,000. But let's read this. This is very, very interesting. According to a 2015 New York Times article, during the period when Russia's atomic energy agency, Rosatom, was acquiring Uranium-1, the chairman of Uranium-1, Ian Telfer, made 4 donations totaling $2.35 million through his family foundation, which were not publicly disclosed by the Clintons despite an agreement to identify all donors. Additionally, other individuals with ties to Uranium One reportedly donated between $1.3 million and $5.6 million. A key figure, Frank Giustra, a Canadian businessman who merged his company with Uranium One, donated $31.3 million, though he sold his stake in 2007 before the Russian deal. Some sources, like PolitiFact, estimate the total from Uranium One investors could be around $4 million if Giustra's contributions are excluded, as he is not Russian. There's also mention of Bill Clinton receiving $500,000 for a 2010 Moscow speech from a Russian investment bank linked to the Kremlin and promoting Uranium One stock. How about that, guys? How about that? Now, isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting? The Democrats are big time standing with Ukraine. I stand with Ukraine. I don't stand with Ukraine, and I'll do a video talking about why. I think it's quite hypocritical for anyone in the United States to claim that they're standing with Ukraine, much less the Democrats, the liberals, the far left people. You should be ashamed of yourselves posting on social media those stupid pictures where it's got the Ukraine flag and I stand with Ukraine. So if we're standing with Ukraine, but we've got a former president, ahead of the Democratic Party, that is in bed with Russia, does this make any sense? Something doesn't add up. Something does not add up. So what makes you think that former President Bill Clinton would want that information to be released? And if he can receive all this money from Russia, if he's in bed with the Russians and the Kremlin and has made lots of money, we won't even talk about the Clinton Foundation because that's a whole nother scandal for another day. But if he could pull all of that off, maybe he does have the power to tell the New York courts that you bet not ever let this stuff out. Bet not. Maybe he does. But there's another individual that I think that exudes great world power, who I believe 100%, beyond a shadow of a doubt, is named and is implicated in those files. Okay, that's my opinion. It's my opinion. And that person just happens to be connected to this operating system that I'm using on this computer. This is not an Apple computer. It's a PC. And so I use this Windows operating system. And the gentleman who created that software, I won't say it so I don't get into trouble, is one of the richest people in the world. And I think that he doesn't want that information to come out. Now, this individual got divorced, and one of the reasons why he got divorced was his shenanigans and his association with Jeffrey Epstein, the visitations that he had on the island, and his penchant for young females. And so why, you would have to imagine that a person, a woman, to divorce one of the richest people in the world, a billionaire, it'd have to be pretty bad. And so she walked. But we know that this individual still wields a hell of a lot of power and still has a hell of a lot of money. A hell of a lot of money. And we know that that individual is not of the Republican liking. He's not. He's on the same side as Bill Clinton. So it's ironic that the Democrats would be shooting off their mouths right now, pushing for the release of these files when they've got some pretty big key donors and some powerful people and former politicians that probably will go down with that ship. And we know that there are more than likely Republicans that will go down with that ship. Now, the theory that I think, which is why the New York courts and whomever it is, the dark forces, the underworld out there, you can call it deep state or whatever you want, the Illuminati, I don't know. Apparently, they're stating that the information release would practically cause a destabilizing effect on the entire world. The entire world. And that's why neither Democrats nor Republicans will remain unscathed if those files were turned over. Okay, so we've got some of our richest people in the world, some of our top politicians in history, and even current politicians, all these people that are in charge that probably don't want those files to be released. And we know that the New York courts, Supreme Court of New York, they're not getting up off of that information. And how is it that the Supreme Court of New York has more power than the federal government? That's kind of interesting. You would think that the Supreme Court would step in, but they can't. They are adjudicators. So what has to happen is there needs to be an appeal. So let's say the Congress says, we're going to subpoena these files in New York State. We want the files right now, and they don't do it. I'm not sure if they can appeal to the Supreme Court. And even if it was a case that could be appealed, the Supreme Court still has to say, we will grant this appeal and we'll look at this. It doesn't mean that they'll overturn anything. It just means that they'll take it into consideration and spend the time to dig through it. So we don't even know if it can go that far. Hello, Letitia Garcia joining us.
Yay!
Yeah, so Letitia says just release the files and let the chips fall where they may. Yeah, it's probably never going to happen. It won't happen. This is a big bumbled mess. It's a big convoluted mess. And like I said, if Donald Trump can't stop the war in Ukraine, and if he can't get these files released, if Pam Bondi, who shot her mouth off with guns blazing, can't release the files, if crazy-eyed Kash Patel can't get the files released and can't even tell the truth about what happened in that prison when that camera was turned off for 1 minute, what makes you think that we're ever going to see that these files will ever see the light of day? It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. So, all in all, as I said before, way back in the beginning, we don't have clear leadership. We do not have a leader. We don't have a clear-cut person that can settle the scores that are going on. We're not going to see the Jeffrey Epstein Files released. They're not going to settle the score because all that we see happening is one party accusing the other of treason, of withholding information, of breaking the law, of being in the Epstein Files, and then the other party will deny that. It's just a back and forth. All we see is the Democrats claiming that Donald Trump has broken the law, should be impeached and jailed. And then we see the Republicans stating that Barack Obama and the Democrats have committed treason and should all be jailed. And neither side will believe it. Here's what's going to happen in the future. We're going to notice that practically none of the people who are wearing the blue hats are going to believe any of the information that Tulsi Gabbard reports. And they'll say this is all nonsense. And at worst case, maybe he spoke out of turn, or maybe he was aware that the hacks didn't happen, but there could have been collusion, so it's okay. And then conversely, you've got people that are wearing the MAGA hats and are never going to believe any information that is levied against Donald Trump and the Republicans. And that's why nothing gets solved and why this country will forever remain in gridlock until someone who is wearing the independent party hat can come along and get people to work together and cut through the political divide. That's it. That's what it's going to take. It's going to take one person that is not brainwashed and obedient to their political cult. See, the way the cults work is this. There is a church, and I won't name the church, but they have their own news media. They have their own newspaper. And the members of this church, they don't think they're a cult, but it is a cult. The members of that church are not allowed to watch, believe, or read any news that doesn't come from this tract that they put out. And I'm not going to name them because I don't want to offend anybody. So they're only told that they are to read their newspaper and they're only allowed to consider truth from what comes from their newspaper. If their leadership doesn't state it, they don't believe it. That's the very definition of a cult. All right, this is a church group. You know who I'm talking about. There's another one that's in Clearwater, Florida. They're doing the same thing. They don't allow their members to accept any information as fact unless it comes from the leadership in their headquarters in Clearwater. You know what that group is. There's a lot of famous people and even political people that are a part of that group. Comes from the state where Pam Bondi was the state attorney general. And she doesn't touch them with a 10-foot pole, even though she's fully aware of what they're doing. Now, in the world of politics, you have the blue cult and you have the red cult. It's just like the Crips and the Bloods. And so these two cults control the dissemination of information to the people that are brainwashed from within their ranks. The people who wear the blue hats are only allowed to listen to MSNBC, PMSNBC, CBS, ABC, NBC, anything that's connected to Rupert Murdoch. All right. Well, they're allowed to listen to whomever they want. But here's the thing. They don't believe anything that does not come from those news agencies that I mentioned. They won't believe it. Now, on the other hand, the people that are in the red hat cult will only believe information, news reporting that comes from Fox News. If it doesn't come from Fox News, they don't believe it. And then both sides claim that only they have the truth, while the other side is doing nothing but doing smear campaigns, lying and manipulating and gaslighting. All right? It's the very definition of a cult. It's why nothing gets done and why you see this constant fighting back and forth on social media every day. I've got friends, and I'm sure you have some, who do nothing but make political posts all day long, every day, defending their political party and claiming that the other is going to be the demise of the world. And they claim that they're the only ones who own the truth. Tell me I'm wrong. Prove me I'm wrong. I don't think you can. I really don't think you can. Now, a lot of you all know that I don't really like a lot of the principles of the Democratic Party, the current one, the radical left, even though there are Democrats that I do agree with. John Fetterman is one of them. My presidential pick from years ago was a Democrat. My favorite one, it was Tulsi Gabbard, but now she's a Republican. You see people switching parties all the time. I don't vote based on a political party because I refuse to fall in line and be brainwashed and turn a blind eye to any information that doesn't come from the news reporting agencies that they are connected with. I won't do it. I won't do it. So that's what I think about this whole Epstein mess and why we're never going to see it become resolved. That's it. Tell me if you disagree. You can post it in the comments if you think that this will be resolved. Post it in the comments if you think Donald Trump is named in a bad way. Post in the comments if you think it's just his name on flight logs. Let me know if you believe that Timu Obama, Hakeem Jeffries, if he is onto something and if he is right in demanding the release and that this is nothing but a cover-up from the Republicans. Let me know in the comments if you think there are other Republicans who probably don't want this information out because they're going to be in hot water. I'll be really curious to know. Try to prove me wrong about my statement that Donald Trump is not the most powerful person in the world, that people can get in his ear, and that there are some deep, dark forces out there who could sit him down and tell him where he has to draw the line. I would love to hear about it. And I tell you what, I got so much more coming your way. I'm very glad to have you here. This is just the beginning. I'm going to be doing a lot of live streams in the near future, breaking the news. So I want you to like, comment, and subscribe to the Go Political channel. We're going to get into some good stuff. So thank you so much for being here with me today. This is Carlton, and I am out.